Entire libraries have disappeared from the world without a trace. This is the true story behind every fallen empire, a cycle of loss and recovery that has shaped all of human history. Knowledge has always been like a phoenix, miraculously rising from the ashes of destruction time and again. But why does this ancient struggle matter to us now, in an era where our own digital archives feel so permanent? The ingenious methods used to hide and preserve our collective memory are more relevant today than ever before. By the end of this journey, you will understand the secret forces that have allowed wisdom to outlive the civilizations that created it. We will explore the hidden vaults and forgotten caches that saved our past from oblivion. Who were the quiet guardians who dedicated their lives to this sacred task? And what difficult choices did they have to make about what was saved and what was lost? What do you believe is the most important knowledge we need to protect for the future? Alexandria's legendary library was a universe contained within walls, a symbol of what an empire could achieve when it gathered the world's knowledge into one place. Yet this grand consolidation created a profound vulnerability. Think of an empire as a magnificent, ancient tree. Its branches spread wide, collecting sunlight and nourishing a vast canopy of art, science, and lore. But if lightning strikes the trunk, the entire canopy is at risk of being lost. This is the peril of centralized knowledge. The very power that builds a great library also paints a target on its doors. When political order shatters, that accumulated wisdom becomes incredibly fragile, threatened by conflict, shifting ideologies, or simple neglect. The fall of Rome was not just a military defeat. It was a cultural amnesia, a slow fading of legal codes, engineering principles, and philosophical texts that had taken centuries to compile. This pattern repeats itself across history. The burning of libraries is not merely about the loss of parchment and ink. It is the unraveling of a civilization's memory, a silent catastrophe that echoes for generations. Recognizing this inherent conflict is crucial. It forces us to ask a deeper question. If centralization is so dangerous, how does anything survive? The answer lies not with kings or conquerors, but with the quiet, determined individuals who saw the storm coming and chose to act. Long before any library was built, the most resilient archive was already in operation, carried in the breath and memory of human beings. An elder in a Mesopotamian courtyard did not simply tell a story. He performed a sacred act of preservation, reciting the Epic of Gilgamesh with a rhythmic precision honed over a lifetime. Every person listening became a living scroll, a potential guardian for the next generation. This was the profound power of the oral tradition, the original hidden archive. It required no clay tablet or papyrus that could be burned or broken. Its security lay in its decentralization, scattered across countless minds. Scribes in these cultures were far more than copyists. They were master memorizers, undergoing years of rigorous training to hold vast quantities of text, from legal codes to epic poetry, with unerring accuracy. As scholar Walter Ong observed, oral cultures developed sophisticated mental tools for this task. They embedded knowledge within rhythmic patterns, repetitive structures, and mnemonic devices, turning complex information into something as memorable as a song. This living system allowed wisdom to travel lightly across deserts and mountains. It could survive fires that consumed cities and outlast invasions that toppled kingdoms. A story stored in this way was also beautifully adaptable, able to be refined and recontextualized for new audiences without being locked to the fragile permanence of a single physical object. The epic poems of Homer circulated for centuries in this oral tapestry before being written down. The ancient Vedas of India were preserved through an unbroken chain of recitation for over 1,000 years, their phonetic purity considered a spiritual imperative. This human-centric approach reveals a fundamental truth. The first and most enduring method for safeguarding knowledge was not about building a fortress of stone, but about nurturing a living network of memory. It proves that the most secure vault is sometimes the one we carry within us, a principle that would soon be translated into more tangible but equally clever forms of concealment. But the human voice is a fragile vessel, and memory can fade with a single generation. A more permanent solution was needed, one that could withstand the slow decay of time itself. This led to the second great method of preservation, knowledge etched not in mind but in stone. Across the Nile, the ancient Egyptians perfected this art. They transformed their entire landscape into a vast, open-air library. Towering obelisks and massive temple walls were not just monuments to power. They were meticulously carved archives, their surfaces a complex tapestry of hieroglyphs detailing everything from historical chronicles to advanced astronomical observations. When an empire crumbled, these stone sentinels often remained standing, silent and enduring. The knowledge they held became a public secret, hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. Its security did not come from locks or guards, but from the very complexity of its presentation. The symbolic language of hieroglyphs was a cryptographic puzzle, a code that required specialized training to interpret. This ensured that only the initiated, the priests and scribes, could fully access the wisdom contained within, protecting it from casual erasure or misunderstanding. The most famous key to one of these codes is the Rosetta Stone. It was never intended as a key for us. It was a practical decree, carved in 3 different scripts to ensure it could be read by priests, government officials, and everyday citizens of its time. Yet this act of bureaucratic communication inadvertently created the tool that would, centuries later, unlock the entire spoken world of ancient Egypt. The durability of stone and metal meant these messages could patiently wait, surviving the fall of dynasties, waiting for a future generation with the curiosity and intellect to understand their language. This monumental approach turned knowledge into a patient legacy, a whisper across millennia carved in granite. But what happens when the threat is not slow decay, but immediate and violent destruction? This necessity would inspire an even more daring and clandestine form of preservation, one that required knowledge to be buried, quite literally, out of sight. A single candle flame illuminates the parchment as a monk carefully copies a text that has been declared forbidden. In this quiet scriptorium, the act of writing is not merely scholarly. It is an act of quiet defiance, a conspiracy to save a fragile thread of thought from being permanently severed. This was the third and most perilous method of preservation, the creation of the secret library. When the world outside deemed certain ideas too dangerous, the only way to protect them was to make them disappear entirely. Hidden chambers were constructed behind monastery walls. Caves along the Dead Sea, like those at Qumran, became secure vaults for sacred scrolls, their entrances sealed and forgotten for 2,000 years. Remote castles had false panels built into their libraries, concealing codices that held scientific theories or historical accounts that contradicted the ruling powers of the era. This was not passive storage. It was an active, deliberate defense, a choice to remove knowledge from circulation entirely in the hope that a safer, more enlightened future would one day arrive to receive it. As the historian James Hannam has noted, the quiet, persistent work of medieval monks in their isolated communities became an unacknowledged bulwark against the complete loss of classical learning. They curated these caches with immense care, selecting only the most vital works to save: a scientific treatise on the nature of the stars, a heretical religious text proposing a different path to the divine, a historical record that told a story the victors wanted erased. Each scroll placed into a hidden jar or behind a stone was a statement of profound value. Someone had decided this particular idea was worth risking their safety, their position, even their life to protect. This practice of selective preservation forces us to confront a difficult and enduring question. What criteria did these quiet guardians use to decide what was saved and what was left to vanish? It was a terrible responsibility, a judgment made in shadow that would shape the intellectual inheritance of generations to come. A quiet monastery in the Egyptian desert becomes a fortress for the mind. While empires rose and fell beyond the sands, Coptic monks dedicated their lives to a sacred task, their pens meticulously copying manuscripts that the outside world had forgotten or sought to destroy. These individuals were not mere scribes, they were curators of a dying world's memory, guided by a profound belief that knowledge was a divine trust. Their sacred duty was to protect it, not for a king or a country, but for humanity itself. This pattern repeated across the globe. In the chaotic aftermath of fallen empires, priests often became unexpected archivists. Their temples and religious institutions, sometimes spared the worst of the destruction, became sanctuaries for more than just people. They sheltered fragile scrolls containing legal codes, agricultural techniques, and star charts, ensuring practical wisdom survived alongside spiritual texts. Meanwhile, scholars became refugees of intellect, fleeing with their most precious possession, their personal libraries. They carried codices and scrolls across mountains and seas, seeking new patrons in new lands where their knowledge could find a safe harbor and a new audience. One of the most brilliant examples of this gathering of wisdom was the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. At its peak, it was not just a library but a vibrant intellectual factory. The scholars there were actively commissioned to seek out and translate the knowledge of the fallen Persian and Greek empires. Their work was so valued that legend says they were sometimes rewarded with gold equal to their own weight, a powerful symbol of how a society can choose to invest in its own enlightenment. This patient, often anonymous labor created invisible chains of transmission that stretched across centuries and continents. A text copied in a dusty desert cell could, generations later, inspire a thinker in a bustling medieval city. The flame of learning was never fully extinguished because these guardians believed the ideas they protected were a fundamental human inheritance. Their story shows us that the most resilient archives were not built of stone, but of human dedication, a dedication that often had to find sanctuary in the most unexpected places. Yet this very act of selection, of choosing what to save, introduces a haunting shadow into the story. For every text that was carefully preserved, countless others were left behind to vanish. What difficult, even heartbreaking, choices did these guardians have to make about what was worthy of salvation? The wind howls against thick stone walls, a lonely sound that only emphasizes the profound isolation. Here, on the edge of the known world, a Benedictine monastery becomes a sanctuary not just for souls, but for the fragile manuscripts that are the last of their kind. Geographic isolation was a deliberate and brilliant strategy. By building in remote locations, from the wild Irish coasts to rugged mountain peaks, these communities created natural fortresses. While political order shattered on the mainland, the scriptorium remained a bastion of quiet industry, its candlelit workbenches serving as the last line of defense against a rising tide of cultural forgetting. This pattern was a global phenomenon. High in the Himalayas, monastic libraries carved into rock faces protected sacred texts from the elements and from conflict. In dense jungles, temple complexes reclaimed by vines secretly housed astronomical charts and medicinal knowledge, their very obscurity their greatest protection. Later, a new kind of sanctuary emerged from the intellectual landscape of medieval Europe, the university. These were not isolated outposts but vibrant, connected hubs. Within their halls, knowledge was not merely stored, it was actively debated, challenged, and copied. A text preserved in an Irish monastery could find its way to a lecture hall in Paris, where it would be compared with a translation from an Arabic scholar and a commentary from a local thinker. This institutional framework provided a stable environment where ideas could be synthesized and built upon, creating a powerful network of learning that transcended any single political border. As the historian Thomas Cahill noted, the quiet, relentless work of monks in these remote locations became the unexpected saving grace for the literature of the classical world during a period of great hardship. The true strength of these sanctuaries, however, lay not just in their walls but in their connections. A lone monastery could preserve a text, but it was the informal, often dangerous, networks of exchange between them that allowed knowledge to breathe and spread again. Messengers and traveling scholars acted as intellectual lifelines, carrying precious copies from one safe house to the next. This system transformed isolated caches into a distributed, resilient library, one with no single point of failure. If one sanctuary fell, the knowledge it held likely existed in another, ensuring the survival of the whole. This collaborative, networked approach to preservation raises a profound question for our own time. In an age of digital centralization, where so much of our collective knowledge resides on a handful of corporate or government servers, have we forgotten the ancient lesson of the distributed archive? The enduring success of these historical sanctuaries suggests that the most secure future for our knowledge may not lie in building a single, perfect vault, but in nurturing a vast and interconnected web of memory. A caravan does not move in silence. The rhythmic plod of camel hooves on dusty trails was accompanied by something far more valuable than the spices and silks in its saddlebags. It carried the living breath of empires, the fragile scrolls and spoken ideas that were the true cargo of the Silk Road. These ancient trade routes were never just pathways for commerce. They were the world's first decentralized knowledge networks, a circulatory system that pumped wisdom away from the heart of conflict and into the waiting minds of new civilizations. When a library burned in one corner of the world, the ideas it contained were often already traveling, safely replicated and scattered across 1,000 miles of desert and mountain. A mathematical concept like the numeral 0 perfected in Gupta, India, could begin a remarkable journey. It would be carried by a scholar or a merchant to the bustling intellectual hub of Baghdad, translated into Arabic by the thinkers at the House of Wisdom, and then, centuries later, make its way into the universities of medieval Europe, fundamentally reshaping mathematics there. This geographic dispersal was the ultimate form of backup. Redundancy was woven into the very fabric of the system. A single text, copied and carried by different travelers along divergent paths, could end up preserved in a Persian library, an Egyptian monastery, and a Spanish translation school all at once. No single fire, no single invasion could destroy every copy. The travelogues of figures like Ibn Battuta offer us a vivid window into this constant, vibrant exchange. He did not just describe markets and kings. He chronicled a flowing conversation of legal customs, scientific observations, and philosophical debates, all moving effortlessly alongside bolts of cloth and bags of pepper. This constant migration meant that the collapse of one great civilization was never the end of its intellectual legacy. The knowledge of a fallen empire could travel incognito, carried by a merchant or a refugee, only to resurface and become the very foundation upon which a new society would rise. It proves that knowledge is not a stationary treasure to be locked away, but a living, migratory force that seeks its own survival. And just as ideas traveled, so too did the people who cherished them most, setting in motion a different kind of rescue mission, one defined by flight and the search for sanctuary. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was not merely a military conquest. It was a moment of profound intellectual scattering. Greek scholars, their world collapsing around them, gathered what they could carry. Their most precious cargo was not gold or jewels, but fragile manuscripts, the last surviving copies of philosophical dialogues, scientific treatises, and epic poems from antiquity. These scholar exiles became the unwilling agents of one of history's greatest intellectual resurgences. Forced to flee their homes, they carried the seeds of classical learning westward, directly into the city-states of Italy. The arrival of a single individual like Manuel Chrysoloras in Florence was a catalytic event. He did not just bring books, he brought a key, the living knowledge of the Greek language, which he then taught to a generation of eager Italian humanists. For the first time in centuries, scholars in the West could read Plato and Aristotle in their original tongue, unlocking nuances and ideas that had been lost in translation for generations. This painful migration created a brilliant cross-pollination. The trauma of exile for the individual became a generative force for an entire continent, fertilizing the ground for the Renaissance to flourish. The knowledge they carried was not preserved in a static state like a relic in a museum. It had to be translated both linguistically and culturally to take root in its new home. A Byzantine text on geometry was not just copied, it was studied, debated, and integrated with new artistic techniques, leading to revolutions in perspective and architecture. This phenomenon reveals a difficult but essential truth about how wisdom endures. Its survival often depends on its ability to migrate, to be reinterpreted and made relevant to a new era and a new people. The sacrifice of the exile ensured that the light of learning, when extinguished in one place, could find a new home where it would burn even brighter. This act of cultural translation was not a betrayal of the original knowledge, but the very mechanism of its salvation. A single word can be a universe of meaning. In the quiet halls of the House of Wisdom, a team of scholars faced a monumental task, translating the complex works of Aristotle and Galen from Greek into Arabic. Their work was anything but a simple substitution of terms. It was a deep, creative act of intellectual alchemy. They were not just moving words from one language to another. They were transplanting entire systems of thought, carefully finding roots for them in a new cultural soil. This process often required a bridge language like Syriac, where Christian scholars first rendered Greek concepts into a Semitic framework, which then made the final leap into Arabic more fluid. When a Greek term for a philosophical concept had no direct Arabic equivalent, the translators did not just leave a blank space. They crafted elaborate phrases, used evocative metaphors, or appropriated existing words, imbuing them with new, nuanced meanings. This act of translation was, by its very nature, an act of interpretation and preservation fused into one. The original text was not merely copied. It was reborn, its core ideas safeguarded by being clothed in a new linguistic form. A text that existed only in Greek was a vulnerable artifact, its fate tied to a single civilization. But a text that lived in Arabic, Syriac, and later Latin became a resilient, multi-versioned entity. No single political collapse could erase it from the world. The brilliant philosopher George Steiner once observed that all human communication is a form of translation. The journey of knowledge across fallen empires is the ultimate proof of this. The translators were the quiet, unsung engineers of this survival. With every careful choice of a word, with every decision to emphasize one concept over another, they were making a judgment about what was essential to save. They had to ask themselves not just what the ancient author said, but what he meant to their own time. How could they make Aristotle's logic resonate with an Islamic theologian, or Galen's medicine relevant to a Persian physician? This linguistic alchemy ensured that the soul of the knowledge endured, even as its body was transformed. The physical manuscripts mirrored this metamorphosis, evolving from Greek parchment to Arabic codex, each iteration a testament to its ongoing journey. This process reveals a profound truth about how ideas truly live. They do not survive by being frozen in time, but by being constantly reanimated, translated, and made vital for each new generation that discovers them. A philosophical dialogue by Plato and a merchant's inventory list may have held equal value to a historian, but their journeys through time were dictated by the skin, plant, or pulp they were written upon. The very substance of the archive was its first and most fundamental layer of defense. In the dry Egyptian air, papyrus, crafted from the Nile's reeds, could last for centuries, becoming a brittle but readable record. Yet take that same scroll to the damp climate of Greece or Rome, and the organic fibers would succumb to mold and moisture in just a few generations. This is the quiet tragedy behind the loss of so much original Greek literature. The plays of Aeschylus and the histories of Herodotus were first recorded on papyrus, a medium perfectly suited to the Mediterranean sun but fatally vulnerable to northern rains. Their survival depended entirely on being copied onto something more resilient before the original pages turned to dust. That salvation came in the form of parchment and vellum, meticulously prepared from animal skins. The shift to these materials in late antiquity was not merely a change in stationery. It was a profound technological leap that extended the lifespan of knowledge from centuries to over 1,000 years. A vellum codex could survive a shipwreck, endure the variable climate of a monastery cellar, and still be readable a millennium later. Its surface could even be scraped clean and written on again, creating a palimpsest where a forgotten mathematical treatise might lurk beneath a later religious text, a ghost of an older idea waiting to be rediscovered. But the true revolution in access came with paper. Invented in China and carried along the Silk Road, this medium made from rags and pulp was far cheaper and faster to produce than vellum. It democratized the written word, enabling a dramatic widening of the intellectual community. A scholar no longer needed a patron's wealth to build a library. He could accumulate paper books, and with that affordability came an explosion of copies, creating the redundancy that is the bedrock of preservation. The choice of material was always a calculated decision, a balance between cost and permanence. A royal decree intended to last for the ages would be cast in bronze, its words literally set in metal. A student's lesson or a merchant's daily accounts, however, were scribbled on reusable wax tablets, their messages temporary by design. This physicality shaped knowledge itself. The weight of a stone tablet demanded concise, monumental language. The endless scroll of papyrus encouraged continuous narrative. The bound codex of parchment or paper created a new, non-linear way of engaging with ideas, where a reader could easily flip between chapters, comparing and cross-referencing in a way that was impossible before. The smell of leather, the rough texture of papyrus, the soft rustle of paper pages, these were not just incidental details. They were the sensory landscape of learning, and each required its own method of safeguarding. The need to protect these physical objects from fire, water, and theft would, in turn, inspire the next great innovation in this enduring story, the evolution of the library itself from a simple room of shelves into a fortress for the mind. An alchemist in a candlelit chamber does not write his formulas in plain text. He deliberately scrambles his words, weaving them into a tapestry of symbols and ciphers that only another adept could possibly unravel. This was the art of encrypted knowledge, a strategy where the archive was hidden not in a cave or a monastery, but within the very language used to record it. The information was made invisible to the casual observer, its safety guaranteed by its own impenetrability. Renaissance thinkers like Leonardo da Vinci filled his notebooks with mirror writing, a simple yet effective cipher that protected his anatomical and engineering insights from prying eyes. Far earlier, the complex symbolic diagrams of Hermetic texts conveyed profound philosophical and spiritual ideas through images of serpents, suns, and geometric shapes. To the uninitiated, these were curious drawings. To the student who understood the symbolic language, they were a complete system of thought. this practice of encoding created a powerful, invisible boundary. It protected the knowledge from those who might misuse it or persecute its holder, while simultaneously forging a community of the initiated. You were not just learning a secret. You were joining a lineage, proving your worth by your ability to decipher the code itself. The ultimate embodiment of this mystery is the Voynich manuscript, a book from the early 15th century. Its pages are filled with bizarre botanical illustrations and celestial charts, all accompanied by a flowing script in a language that has defied every attempt at decryption for centuries. Is it an elaborate record of lost botanical knowledge, a sophisticated cipher for alchemical secrets, or an intricate forgery designed to deceive? We may never know for certain. But its enduring enigma speaks to a profound human impulse. When knowledge is too dangerous, too radical, or too precious for its time, the only way to save it for the future might be to wrap it in a riddle. This forces a challenging reconsideration of what preservation truly means. Some knowledge was not saved for immediate use. It was bottled up like a message cast into the sea of time, entrusted to the hope that a future generation would possess the key to unlock its meaning. And just as some chose to hide knowledge in code, others made the fateful decision to hide it in plain sight, embedded within the very stories and art that a culture held most dear. The hallways of the Great Library of Alexandria were said to contain the entire intellectual harvest of the ancient world. This was not a quiet sanctuary for scholars alone, but a monumental project of a powerful state, its agents empowered to board trading ships and confiscate any scrolls they found, copying them meticulously before returning them. This aggressive centralization created a collection of unparalleled scope, a universe of knowledge under one roof, yet this very strength was its ultimate vulnerability. The story of its destruction is often told as a single, catastrophic fire, a moment of tragic loss. The reality, as historians have pieced together, is far more complex and perhaps more instructive. The library likely did not fall in one great conflagration, but suffered a slow death by 1,000 cuts over centuries. It endured periods of political neglect, a withdrawal of the royal funding that sustained its scribes and its acquisitions. It weathered sporadic episodes of conflict and damage, a gradual decay that mirrored the fading power of the Ptolemaic dynasty that had built it. This slow unraveling is the true fate of many great repositories, a quiet fading that is often more dangerous than a sudden, dramatic blaze. But here is where the story turns and a deeper truth about knowledge emerges. The wisdom of Alexandria did not simply vanish into smoke, it had already escaped. Scholars like Aristarchus of Samothrace, who had honed his methods within its walls, carried their expertise with them when they left, seeding other centers of learning with the library's intellectual traditions. Vital texts from its collection were not unique. Copies existed in rival institutions like the Library of Pergamum, and in the private collections of wealthy patrons scattered across the Mediterranean. The most important ideas had been absorbed, quoted, and debated in the works of other authors, creating a ghostly echo of the library that survived in derivative forms. This is the real hidden archive of Alexandria. It was not a secret chamber within the library itself, but the vast, distributed network of copies, scholars, and citations that had already spread across the known world. The library's physical collection could be diminished, but the ideas it championed had achieved a form of immortality through this intellectual diaspora. The legend of its total loss, however, has burned brighter than any historical fire. It serves as our civilization's most potent parable, a perpetual warning about the fragility of our collective memory. The phantom of Alexandria's halls haunts every subsequent effort to build a great library, reminding us that no single vault, no matter how grand, can be trusted with our entire inheritance. Its legacy is this enduring lesson that the survival of knowledge ultimately depends on the principle of redundancy, on ensuring that no idea has only one home. A crown needs more than an army to command true legitimacy. It requires the weight of history, a connection to the wisdom of past glories. Across the medieval Islamic world, the courts of rival caliphs engaged in a quiet but intense competition, each striving to assemble a library more magnificent than the last. This was not a simple contest of wealth. It was a battle for intellectual supremacy, where the preserved knowledge of fallen empires like Persia and Rome became the ultimate trophy, a tangible symbol of a new dynasty's right to rule. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad was not built in a vacuum. It was a direct response to this competitive drive, a declaration that the Abbasid Caliphate was the true heir to all the learning that had come before. This rivalry transformed knowledge into a coveted resource, actively sought out, translated, and protected not for its own sake, but for the power and prestige it conferred. When the Mongol Ilkhanate established itself in Persia, they did not simply erase the past. They built the Maraghe Observatory, a monumental scientific institution that incorporated and then advanced upon the astronomical knowledge of the very civilizations they had conquered. The stars, it seemed, were a universal language of power, and mastery over them required absorbing the wisdom of those who had come before. This pattern of competitive preservation created a continuous, if unexpected, chain of custody for humanity's intellectual heritage. A new empire, eager to claim the mantle of a great civilization, would often become the most diligent custodian of the old one's legacy. The fierce rivalry between Renaissance city-states like Florence and Venice fueled a frantic search for Greek manuscripts from the collapsed Byzantine world. Possessing a rare codex by Plato or Archimedes was not just an academic pursuit. It was a strategic asset, a way to attract the finest scholars and artists, thereby enhancing a city's cultural prestige and, by extension, its political influence. This dynamic reveals a profound irony. The very ambition that drives one empire to conquer another can also be the force that safeguards the defeated culture's greatest achievements. Knowledge in this light becomes a form of intellectual capital, its value recognized and hoarded by rising powers. But this same preservation, born from rivalry, also sets the stage for a more dangerous turn. Once gathered and refined, these preserved ideas can be sharpened into tools of influence and control, their original purpose transformed in the service of a new empire's grand design. A preserved idea carries no inherent morality. Its power lies dormant until a new hand picks it up, repurposing ancient wisdom for a future its original creators could never have foreseen. The Spanish conquistadors arriving in the New World did not voyage into a vacuum. Their ships were guided by star charts and navigational techniques refined from Arabic and Greek texts. Their military formations were echoes of Roman legions, and their steel swords were the product of metallurgical knowledge passed down for centuries. This was not a confrontation between the old world and the new, but rather a clash between a culture armed with the consolidated, weaponized knowledge of multiple fallen empires and civilizations that had developed in isolation. The administrative precision the Spanish employed to manage their new territories was a direct inheritance from Roman law and bureaucracy, systems preserved and studied for generations in European universities. The conquistadors themselves were likely unaware of the deep lineage of the tools they wielded, but they were the living beneficiaries of a long chain of preservation. This demonstrates a stark paradox. The very act of saving knowledge, of hiding it in a monastery or translating it in a royal library, does not guarantee it will be used for enlightenment. It simply ensures it remains in circulation, available to be sharpened into a weapon by a future generation with a different set of intentions. The Byzantine Empire's most closely guarded military secret was the formula for Greek fire, a terrifying incendiary weapon that could burn even on water. This preserved technological advantage, a legacy of earlier chemical knowledge, allowed them to defend their capital for centuries, turning back fleet after fleet. Similarly, the mathematical and engineering principles of antiquity, carefully copied onto parchment, later enabled the construction of the massive trebuchets and complex fortifications that defined siege warfare in the Middle Ages. Knowledge that had once been pursued for pure geometry or architectural beauty was now calculating trajectories to breach city walls. This duality forces a sobering reflection. A quiet guardian who hides a scroll to save it from one conflict cannot possibly foresee how that same scroll might be used to fuel another centuries later. The hidden archive, therefore, does not just preserve culture. It preserves potential both for creation and for devastation. The immense responsibility of the knowledge keeper is not merely to protect, but to somehow instill a wisdom in its use, a task far more difficult than simply locking a text away in a chest. This martial application of preserved lore stands in stark contrast to another, more elusive form of knowledge that was being safeguarded, one that sought not to conquer the world, but to understand its deepest, most hidden mysteries. A locked chest in a scholar's study might hold more than gold. Within its confines, a beautifully illustrated alchemical manuscript presents a universe of meaning to those who understand its visual language. A serpent swallowing its own tail is not merely a curious animal. It is the Ouroboros, a symbol for the cyclical nature of matter and the unity of all things. A dragon could represent primal, chaotic matter awaiting transformation through the alchemist's art. In these esoteric traditions, a single image could contain layers of spiritual and practical knowledge, encrypted for safety. This was the world of Hermeticism, alchemy, and Kabbalah, a powerful undercurrent of thought that flowed parallel to the mainstream philosophical rivers. These were heterodox ideas, often at odds with the established religious or scientific authorities of their day. Their preservation, therefore, could not happen in the open halls of a great library. It was a clandestine operation, managed by small, secretive circles of initiates who passed these precious manuscripts directly from master to student, hand to trusted hand across generations. As the scholar Francis Yates revealed, these seemingly fringe traditions were not intellectual dead ends. They provided vital conceptual frameworks that significantly influenced the Renaissance and even the birth of the scientific revolution. The alchemists' relentless experimentation with matter, driven by a spiritual goal, helped lay the groundwork for modern chemistry. The Kabbalists' intricate maps of divine emanation offered a model of a structured, knowable cosmos that resonated with early scientists seeking to decode the laws of nature. This survival story reveals a crucial dimension of the human drive to preserve. It was not only practical knowledge about agriculture or law that was deemed worthy of saving. Entire alternative worldviews, mystical systems that offered radically different explanations for humanity's place in the cosmos, were also hidden away, protected by those who believed their value was worth any risk. This secretive effort often relied on the most intimate and resilient of all human networks, the unbroken chain of the family lineage, where a father would teach his son a craft so specialized that its very existence depended on their silent pact. A father's workshop in Renaissance Florence was far more than a place of business. It was a sanctuary for secrets, where the flickering light of an oil lamp would illuminate notebooks filled with diagrams and notes, their pages handled with the reverence of a sacred text. These were not for sale. They were the living archive of a family of architects, a direct line of practical wisdom stretching back to the builders of the Roman Empire. Before universities could grant degrees or public libraries could offer scrolls, the most vital and specialized forms of knowledge found their home within the intimate bonds of family lineages. A guild of stonemasons, a dynasty of physicians, a school of philosophers, these were the original custodians of expertise. Their methods were not written in textbooks for all to see, but transmitted through a powerful combination of oral instruction, secret manuscripts, and the daily, watchful apprenticeship of a son learning his father's craft. This knowledge was their most precious form of capital, the trade secret that guaranteed their status, their income, and their legacy. It was a form of intellectual property guarded not by law, but by blood and trust. Consider the legendary strength of Damascus steel blades or the enduring mystery of Roman concrete. These were not technologies lost in a library fire. They vanished because the specific family or guild lineages that held the complete, hands-on understanding of their creation were severed. A conflict that claimed a master craftsman, a wave of illness that swept through a city, or simply a generation where no child had the aptitude or interest. Any of these could snap a chain of transmission that had lasted for centuries. This model of preservation reveals a profound truth about knowledge itself. It can be as deeply personal as a family name, as tangible as a plot of land. It lives not just in books, but in the hands of a weaver at her loom, in the discerning eye of a glassblower judging the heat of his furnace, in the precise memory of a storyteller reciting an epic that has never been written down. These dynastic archives were remarkably resilient in times of peace and stability, their secrets deepening with each generation. Yet they were heartbreakingly fragile when catastrophe struck, their survival resting entirely on the fragile, unbroken thread of human relationship. The enduring strength of this system lay in its intimacy, but its greatest weakness was its exclusivity, a vulnerability that would ultimately inspire a new, more collective approach to safeguarding our shared inheritance. The most enduring archives were sometimes built not by those hiding from power, but by power itself. An emperor understood that to rule a vast territory, he needed more than soldiers and taxes. He needed a perfect, unchanging memory of his domain. In ancient China, the Qin dynasty's ruthless efficiency extended to its scribes, who standardized writing and filled government archives with meticulous records on everything from population counts to the precise dimensions of cart axles. This was not an act of scholarship, but one of control. A unified empire required a single, authoritative version of the truth, and the state archive was its fortress. Rome's tabularium, a monumental building clinging to the Capitoline Hill, served a similar purpose. It was the empire's filing cabinet, housing decrees, treaties, and financial records that gave legal and administrative shape to a sprawling realm. Centuries later, William the Conqueror would orchestrate the Domesday Book, a vast survey of England so thorough it felt like a final judgment. These projects shared a common goal: to turn the chaotic flow of human life into organized, retrievable data that could be used to enforce laws, collect revenue, and solidify a dynasty's claim to legitimacy. The sheer scale of these state-sponsored efforts was their greatest strength. They employed armies of scribes, consumed vast quantities of parchment, clay, or paper, and were housed in structures built to impress and intimidate. Yet this formalized approach also created a profound irony. When the Hittite capital of Hattusa was set ablaze by invaders, the intense heat did not destroy the royal archives of clay tablets. It fired them, baking the cuneiform records into permanent ceramic, inadvertently preserving for archaeologists the entire bureaucratic correspondence of a lost empire. The very disaster meant to erase their civilization instead fossilized its paperwork. This top-down model of preservation presents a clear contrast to the grassroots efforts of monks and merchants. It was centralized, systematic, and designed to serve the interests of the state. What, then, is the legacy of these imperial archives? They offer a crucial, if narrowly focused, window into the past. We learn about land distribution, legal codes, and military campaigns, but we see this world primarily through the eyes of its rulers. The voices of everyday people, their personal stories and private beliefs are often absent, filtered out by the bureaucratic machine. This selective memory reminds us that preservation is never neutral. The state saves what reinforces its narrative, what proves its right to rule, and in doing so, it makes a powerful statement that control of information is ultimately control of history itself. This realization would echo through the centuries, inspiring a new kind of institution, one designed not just to administer an empire, but to capture the entire intellectual footprint of a nation. A sealed jar buried in the Egyptian sand holds its breath for 1600 years. Then, in 1945, a farmer's mattock strikes its surface, and the hidden Gnostic Gospels within are suddenly returned to the light of day. For countless hidden archives, endurance was a patient, silent waiting. Their survival was a passive act of preservation, a deep freeze in time that relied entirely on a future generation having the curiosity and the tools to find them. The science of archaeology has become the primary means of waking these dormant libraries, of physically returning lost knowledge to the world. When workers excavating a royal palace in Nineveh broke into a chamber in the 1850s, they did not find gold. They found the library of Ashurbanipal, a vast collection of cuneiform tablets that had been deliberately buried within the collapsing walls of the Assyrian Empire. The fire that consumed the palace during its sack had baked the clay tablets, hardening them into permanent records that preserved everything from epic poetry to medical remedies. In Mexico, sacred cenotes, natural sinkholes considered gateways to the underworld, yielded waterlogged but miraculously preserved Mayan bark paper books, their complex glyphs detailing astronomy and ritual. There is a profound poetic justice in these discoveries. The very act of hiding knowledge to save it from an immediate threat, whether religious persecution or invading armies, is precisely what allowed it to be preserved for a future that might finally be ready to understand it. This process of recovery is not complete with the physical dig. The work of philologists and linguists who then decipher these finds, who painstakingly unlock the codes of Linear B or Mayan glyphs, is the essential next step. They are the modern translators, continuing the ancient work of preservation by transforming a silent artifact back into a living, intelligible idea. Every unearthed archive reminds us that our current understanding of history is a temporary patchwork, a narrative constantly being revised and enriched as new fragments of these long-hidden libraries emerge from the earth. This is not a process confined to the past. Today, digital archaeologists use advanced imaging to read the ghostly impressions of words on crumbled scrolls from Herculaneum, texts carbonized by volcanic ash yet still holding their secrets. The chain of custody, begun by a guardian hiding a text in a jar, is only completed when an archaeologist brushes away the last layer of dust and a translator speaks the words aloud once more. Deep inside a mountain on a remote Arctic island, a silent chamber maintains a constant, frigid temperature. Within its walls, reels of specially encoded film hold the entire world of open-source software, a modern-day library of Alexandria preserved for 1,000 years. This is the GitHub Arctic Code Vault, and it represents the latest chapter in humanity's ancient struggle to protect its memory. Our collective knowledge has migrated from parchment and stone to the ethereal realm of digital code, and with this transition comes a new set of vulnerabilities. We no longer fear fire or mold, but data corruption, the silent decay of a hard drive. We face format obsolescence, where a file remains perfectly intact but the language to read it has been forgotten, a digital Rosetta Stone waiting to be rediscovered. And we confront the threat of cyber attacks, a form of virtual sacking that can erase entire libraries in an instant. The response to these new dangers, however, echoes the old strategies. The Internet Archive, with its relentless, automated effort to take snapshots of the entire web, is a global monastery scriptorium for the digital age, creating countless copies to ensure redundancy. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault, preserving the biological code of our crops, applies the same principle of geographic dispersal, hiding our agricultural future in a frozen sanctuary far from the centers of conflict. These projects employ astonishing technology, from robotic arms that retrieve data tapes in vast, climate-controlled warehouses to blockchain ledgers that create an unchangeable, verified record of what has been saved. The core principles are timeless, redundancy, dispersal, and encoding for longevity, simply translated into a new vocabulary. Yet the digital world has also birthed entirely new kinds of hidden archives. The dark web and encrypted cloud storage are the modern equivalent of the sealed cave or the false panel in the library wall. They are spaces where knowledge, from sensitive historical documents to suppressed artistic works, can be stored beyond the immediate reach of corporations or governments, protected by layers of cryptographic code instead of stone and shadow. This technological leap forces a profound ethical question upon us, one that our ancestors faced with only a handful of precious scrolls. In an era of seemingly infinite storage, what do we choose to save for the next millennium, and what do we allow to vanish into the digital void? A curator stands in a burning library, the air thick with smoke and urgency. He can only save a single chest of manuscripts from the flames. His hand hovers over a beautifully illuminated gospel, then over a practical manual for crop rotation, then over a collection of love poems written in a common dialect. In this suspended moment, the entire future of memory hangs on a single, impossible choice. This is the stark reality behind every act of preservation. The survival of knowledge has never been a neutral process of simply saving everything. It is a deeply human drama, constantly shaped by the values, the biases, and the power structures of the moment. Throughout history, the knowledge that was systematically preserved almost always belonged to the literate, the powerful, and the orthodox. The voices of the marginalized, the oral histories of subjugated peoples, and the quiet dissenting opinions were rarely granted space in the hidden archive. They were the first to be silenced, the first to be lost to the fire or the slow decay of forgetting. This creates a historical record that is inherently and profoundly skewed. We see the past through a filtered lens, one that amplifies the official story while leaving the whispers of the everyday in shadow. The very act of creating a hidden vault involves a curatorial decision that echoes through time. What is truly valuable enough to save? Is it the epic poetry celebrating kings, or the folk remedies passed down by peasant healers? Is it the authorized scientific treatise, or the heretical religious text that challenges the established order? The medieval monk might prioritize a theological work to ensure the salvation of souls. The Renaissance scholar might choose a Greek philosophical dialogue to fuel a new age of reason. Their choices, made under pressure, determine the intellectual inheritance of generations. These ethical questions are not relics of a distant past. They are painfully relevant for the digital archivist of today, who must decide which terabytes of our global conversation to preserve for the next millennium from an ocean of data. Do we save the social media posts of a revolutionary movement, or the corporate records of a multinational giant, the open source code that powers our world, or the proprietary software that runs our banks? Acknowledging this inherent selection bias is a crucial step toward a more honest understanding of our history. It reminds us that the triumphant story of enduring knowledge is also a silent story of immense, incalculable loss. Our picture of antiquity, of the Middle Ages, of any fallen empire, is a beautiful but partial mosaic, reconstructed solely from the fragments that the arbiters of the past, for their own reasons, deemed worthy of a future. A single broken piece of Minoan pottery, decorated with the image of a leaping dolphin, tells a silent but compelling story. This fragment, and millions like it, are the raw materials from which we reconstruct the memory of fallen empires. We never receive the past as a complete, unedited manuscript. It arrives as a shattered mosaic, and the work of historians, archaeologists, and linguists is to piece it back together, knowing full well that many of the original tiles are lost forever. This process is far from a simple mechanical task. It is a deeply interpretive art, a form of informed storytelling based on the scattered clues that time has chosen to spare. The discovery of the Epic of Gilgamesh on 12 clay tablets in the ruins of Nineveh did not just add another story to our bookshelves. It fundamentally reshaped our understanding of Mesopotamian culture, revealing a pre-biblical flood narrative and a profound, timeless meditation on mortality and friendship that resonated across millennia. Each new fragment that emerges from the earth forces us to reconsider the grand narrative we have woven. A single new inscription can challenge long-held assumptions about a king's reign, a trade route, or a forgotten conflict. This means our history is not a fixed monument, but a living, breathing conversation between the present and the past, constantly being revised and refined. The quiet guardian who hid a scroll, the scholar who translated it centuries later, and the modern scientist who carbon dates the parchment are all indispensable collaborators in this grand project. They are links in a single, unbroken chain of curiosity that stretches across the ages. This collaborative effort across time often uncovers unexpected threads connecting the world. The stylistic influence of Greek art is found in statues thousands of miles away in ancient India. Similar motifs of a heroic figure battling a serpent appear in myths from Scandinavia to Mesoamerica. These are not mere coincidences, but evidence of a deep, ancient network of exchange, proof that even the most isolated cultures were often touching a shared, global current of ideas. Our identity, our sense of where we come from, is built upon this foundation of recovered fragments, a beautiful and ever-evolving patchwork that reminds us the story of humanity is still being unearthed, one precious piece at a time. The most brilliant innovations rarely emerge from a single, isolated tradition. They spark into being at the crossroads where different streams of preserved knowledge converge and merge. Picture a single star chart from the Islamic Golden Age, its intricate lines mapping the heavens. This was not a simple copy of an older Greek or Indian model. It was a magnificent synthesis, weaving the geometrical models of Ptolemy's Almagest with the precise trigonometric tables developed in India and new observations from the skies above Baghdad. This chart was a living conversation across centuries and continents, a testament to what happens when the hidden archives of multiple fallen empires are brought together and allowed to speak to one another. The great intellectual hubs of history, like Baghdad's House of Wisdom, were not mere storehouses. They were dynamic fusion centers where scholars, fluent in multiple languages, actively compared, debated, and integrated the rescued knowledge of Greece, Persia, and India. A mathematical concept for calculating volumes, preserved on an Indian palm leaf manuscript, could suddenly provide the key to an architectural challenge faced by a Persian builder. A philosophical framework from a fallen empire, carefully translated into Arabic, might offer the ethical structure for a new legal system in a rising caliphate. This cross-pollination is the true engine of human progress. It demonstrates that the ultimate value of preserving knowledge is not in hoarding it like treasure in a locked chest. Its real power is unleashed only when it is allowed to interact, to challenge, and to blend with other traditions. The endurance of an idea, therefore, is not about freezing it perfectly in time. It is about ensuring its continued participation in an ongoing, global conversation. The interconnected legacy we have inherited from those quiet guardians is not a collection of separate, dusty scrolls. It is a single, woven tapestry of human understanding, each thread strengthened by the ones beside it. What new synthesis might we be fostering today, with the entire digital inheritance of humanity at our fingertips, and what future breakthroughs are waiting to be born from this global exchange? A cold monastery wall holds back the encroaching darkness, but the true battle is waged by the solitary scribe dipping his pen. His work is not driven by a king's command or a promise of reward, but by a force far more profound, the innate human drive to leave a mark that outlasts a single lifetime. This psychological imperative is the bedrock upon which every hidden archive was built. We are perhaps the only species acutely aware of our own impermanence, and this awareness ignites a powerful urge to defy it. Preserving knowledge is our most eloquent rebellion against the silence of oblivion. It is how we weave our individual threads into the vast, enduring tapestry of human consciousness, ensuring that our stories, our discoveries, and our hard-won wisdom do not simply vanish when we are gone. The psychologist Erich Fromm described this as a shift from simply having things to truly being part of something larger. We are not just accumulating scrolls or data, we are actively participating in a continuous stream of thought that flows from the deep past into the distant future. This is the same fundamental need that compels a parent to tell family stories to a child, a community to erect a monument, or a scientist to publish a groundbreaking paper. It is a deep-seated yearning for connection, a way to reach back toward the whispers of our ancestors and forward to the citizens of a world we will never see. The quiet guardian hiding a jar of scrolls and the modern programmer uploading code to a global vault are united by this same timeless impulse. They are not just saving information, they are building bridges across the chasm of time. Recognizing this transforms our understanding of those hidden caches. They are not merely storehouses of facts, but physical manifestations of the human spirit's refusal to be extinguished. They are our collective declaration that our search for meaning, our laughter, our grief, and our curiosity matter enough to be carried forward. This profound need to connect is the invisible architect of our shared memory, and it now challenges us to consider what story our own era will whisper to the future. Our own digital footprints are now the fragile scrolls of tomorrow, a sprawling and chaotic archive whose ultimate shape is being decided by our daily choices. This is the quiet legacy we are actively building, a hidden archive for the future constructed not in remote caves, but in the cold hum of server farms and the deliberate silence of seed vaults buried deep within mountains. We are the new guardians, and the responsibility is staggering. Are we preserving a balanced portrait of our time, one that includes our triumphs alongside our profound mistakes? Or are we curating a sanitized version of history filtered through the lens of commercial algorithms and political convenience? When an archaeologist of the far future sifts through the digital strata of our era, what will they truly find? They might recover vast troves of social media data, yet completely miss the nuanced, unrecorded conversations that defined a community. They could access every major news publication but have no window into the local newsletters, the grassroots art, or the disappearing languages that held unique ways of seeing the world. The very tools we use to preserve, from proprietary file formats to corporate cloud platforms, introduce a powerful selection bias. Knowledge that is profitable or popular is easily saved, while the quiet, the subversive, and the unmonetized aspects of our culture risk fading into permanent obscurity. This is why conscious projects like the Internet Archive and the Svalbard Global Seed Vault are so vital. They are modern monastic orders working against the tide to ensure that our collective memory includes more than just the official story. They are hiding seeds, both literal and digital, to guarantee that a diverse and resilient inheritance can be rediscovered after a potential collapse. Our era's greatest challenge is not the technical capacity to store information, but the wisdom to choose what is truly essential. We must ask ourselves if we are preserving the equivalent of royal decrees on stone, or if we are also saving the common poetry, the shared recipes, and the hard lessons from our failures. The chain of preservation that stretches back to the first storyteller around a fire now passes directly through our hands. We are the empire, and the fragments we choose to hide away today will become the foundation upon which some future civilization understands our humanity. Our journey through these hidden archives reveals a stunning truth. Knowledge is not merely a collection of facts, but the most resilient force in human history. It has outlasted marble monuments and golden thrones, surviving because we embedded it in the breath of storytellers, the patience of stone carvers, and the quiet defiance of monks in candlelit rooms. The enduring strategies are clear to us now. Redundancy, by ensuring no idea had only one home. Dispersal, by scattering wisdom across deserts and oceans so no single fire could consume it all. And translation, the beautiful alchemy that allowed ancient thoughts to be reborn in new languages, finding relevance in unforeseen futures. Above all, it was the unwavering dedication of countless, often nameless, guardians that built bridges across the chasms of time. This legacy is far more than a record of the past. It is the very foundation upon which we build our future. Every scientific discovery, every philosophical insight, every work of art we create today stands upon the vast, hidden library that these individuals saved for us. Their quiet work charges us with a sacred trust. We are now the guardians, the curators of this moment for those who will follow. What story will our era whisper to the future? What single thread of knowledge do you value so deeply that you would ensure its survival for the next 1,000 years? Share your thoughts in the comments below on what you believe is truly worth preserving. If this exploration of our shared intellectual heritage resonated with you, please subscribe for more journeys into the depths of history and myth.